This is Matthew Cratter from Trader University, and today I want to talk about how to do communism the right way. Now, traditionally, what we've had happen during the Russian Revolution, Chinese Revolution, and other communist/socialist revolutions is you have the government take on increasing power. The government takes over the means of production, which is sort of the Marxists speak for it. They take over the factories, the farms, and then they start to prohibit private industry. You can't run a private factory, you can't run a private farm. And this is sort of in more traditional industrial pretext societies where you basically have factories after the Industrial Revolution and you have various forms of farming. So this was the traditional playbook for communist/socialist revolutionaries. The only problem with this is that central planning does not work very well. So we get these famous stories about shoe shortages in the Soviet Union, for example. It turns out that the Soviet Union actually produced twice as many shoes as Italy and 3 times as many shoes as the United States. They used to produce almost 800 million pairs of shoes per year, and yet you had people standing in very long lines to get shoes. It turns out this was because the shoes that were being produced did not respond to market signals. In other words, no one wanted Soviet shoes, so they would line up to get the very rare imported shoes. There's another famous central planning story where the government told a certain shoe factory to increase production by a certain amount. The factory did not have enough raw materials, but they were required to crank out a certain number of shoes per day or per year. And so in order to meet that requirement, while not having enough materials, they decided to produce smaller shoes, i.e. children's shoes. So then what happened in that region is you ended up with a shortage of adult shoes, but you had a lot of children's shoes. Something similar happened with the Great Leap Forward under Mao in the Chinese Communist Revolution. And this was basically private farming was prohibited. The government took over the factories and the farms. And unfortunately, this resulted in what was probably the greatest famine in human history. Somewhere between 15 and 55 million people died, according to the Wikipedia article on the Great Leap Forward. So the real problem with communism in this form where the government takes over the means of production is that it distorts prices. And when you distort prices, you don't allow the free market to engage in price discovery, which is a way of relaying information about people's demands and wants as well as supplies. Free market price signals work really well at allocating resources and signaling demand. Central planning works very, very poorly, as we saw by the failure, the starvation in China and Russia and their pretty pathetic economies. But then came the Chinese Communist Party, really starting in, I'd say, the early 90s. And they had this idea that you just have to be smart about it. Don't take over the means of production. Don't seize the factories. Don't seize the farms and take them away from the smart people who run them, the business people, the entrepreneurs, and give them to some government bureaucrat who doesn't know how to run anything like most politicians. Instead, let the business people, let the smart people keep running the factories and farms, so to speak, but then use central planning, use artificial intelligence, use social credit scoring to track and control the population. And this is really the Chinese system as we see it now. It's been extremely successful. You might call this a socialist market economy. Some people call it state capitalism. Well, whatever it is, it works really well. If you're finding this video helpful so far, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Maybe share this with a few friends. So what I'm going to suggest in this video, and I've suggested in previous videos, is that the US is moving towards a similar system. At the end of the Cold War, in the early 90s, it became very clear to the world that capitalism just works much better than communism or socialism or centrally planned economies. But what's happening this time around is it's becoming increasingly clear, I think, to the Western elites, sort of the Davos crowd, that Chinese capitalism combined with spying by the government works really well, especially in the high-tech era when everyone has a spy phone in their pocket. I like this meme, people in the 60s, I better not say that or the government will wiretap my house. And then people today, hey, wiretap, do you have a recipe for pancakes? This is the system that we're moving towards. And it's ironic, the US fought communism and socialism in various countries, some more successfully like the USSR, some less successfully in Southeast Asia, but then is now rapidly moving towards a highly totalitarian system that ignores the Bill of Rights, ignores the Constitution, and spies on its own citizens in the name of protecting them or pretending to protect them. The US is definitely moving towards a Chinese-like system. And if you haven't noticed this in the last 15 months, I'd encourage you to open your eyes. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I think it's a very bad thing. But I think this is what is happening. And I think it's going to be very, very difficult to fight. And this is basically the battle we are engaged in now. The basic idea is let the Mark Zuckerbergs and Tim Cooks keep running things in a very smart way, the Jeff Bezoses, and then track and control the population using big tech. So don't take over the means of production. Let the smart people run the means of production, but then harness that energy and especially harness that technology to spy and control people. And as part of this, you will be increasingly pressured not to engage in what George Orwell called wrong think or thought crime, where you basically think the wrong things. You can't discuss certain things on social media, and a lot of these discussions are rapidly being eliminated from the internet. We are being groomed into being sheeple rather than free people. This is something that Bitcoin fixes. If you have your own sovereign form of money, you get to route around this sort of government control and tyranny. If you hold your own Bitcoin and you self-custody it, the government cannot seize it from you. They cannot control you. But once the government moves away from cash, and make no mistake, this is what's happening, we're moving toward a central bank digital currency system where there's no more cash. You just have a wallet with the Fed, and they can apply individual policies to you. So maybe you've been a bad person, so you have to pay the 3% bad person climate fee or climate tax. Maybe you went to a protest that you shouldn't have been at, and so your government wallet gets frozen. And this will be much worse than having your bank account frozen, because there'll be no recourse. It'll basically be the Federal Reserve that's frozen your assets. So it's very important to understand that we're moving towards this Chinese system, and to increasingly wean yourself from big tech. Stop giving them all your personal information, and also start thinking about what is going to happen when the government has complete control of your money. There's no more cash. Every single transaction is monitored. Taxes are automatically withdrawn from your government, your central bank, your Federal Reserve wallet. I go into this in a little bit more detail in this really important video called The Endgame is Here, Humanity Hard Fork, where I argue that the real fight is not between the left and the right, or Democrats and Republicans, or any other sort of social justice fight. The real fight is between sheeple and free people. People are going to choose which side they go on. Some people, in fact, a lot of people will go the very comfortable route where they put their hands in big tech. They allow everything to be controlled. And in many ways, big tech does make our lives easier. You can buy everything through Amazon. You can have everything delivered to your doorstep. But this also gives governments through the high-tech sector increased control of you. And so one thing I'm talking about on this channel now, even more than before, is how to protect your privacy, how to protect your money, and how to ensure that you don't go too far down the wrong fork. This is a hard fork, and the decisions you make now are going to have implications for your children and grandchildren as well. The deeper you go into government control, the more difficult it will be to ever return. And you can just ask people living in China what it's like to have a social credit score system where if you commit thought crime or wrong think, you can't leave the city, you can't get ahead in your job, people will start to shun you, you'll lose family and friends. This is the system, I believe, unfortunately, that's coming to the US. If you want to hear more about this, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Stay tuned, and hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. Let me know your questions, comments in the comment section below, and I appreciate you watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.